Lieutenant Kara Mitchell adjusted the headset over her short-cropped hair, her fingers dancing over the controls of Flight 482. The small charter plane, barely larger than a delivery van in the sky, hummed steadily as it cut through the crisp Colorado morning. Outside, the Rockies glistened under a golden sun, jagged peaks rising like frozen giants, rivers snaking like silver ribbons through their valleys. Inside, tourists gawked at the view, cameras flashing, laughter filling the cabin. Kara felt a pang of unease. The serenity of the mountains always carried a hidden danger. She scanned the instruments, double-checking altitude, fuel, and engine performance, her trained eyes noticing every minor fluctuation. It started as a subtle shudder, almost imperceptible. Then came the smell, acrid smoke curling from the left engine. Alarms blared, piercing the passengers' laughter. Kara's stomach dropped. The left engine had failed. She gritted her teeth, hands steady despite adrenaline flooding her veins. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm," she announced, voice firm but tinged with urgency. Few passengers heeded her, eyes wide, clutching armrests, their smiles evaporating into pale terror. Kara's mind raced. Emergency procedures ran like a familiar, well-rehearsed sequence. Check fuel lines, assess engine status, calculate nearest landing zones. Every second felt like an eternity. She glanced at the GPS. Most of the region was rugged wilderness, mountains stretching endlessly in every direction. Her eyes landed on a narrow valley below, a stretch of flat terrain just long enough for a risky emergency landing. "Brace for impact," she shouted, forcing the words past her panic. The plane lurched as she banked sharply, the failing engine coughing violently. Smoke curled into the cabin, choking the passengers, and Kara could hear cries of fear mingled with the whine of failing machinery. She bit back her own rising terror, focusing on the valley below. Trees flashed past like blades as she descended, her hands shaking slightly on the yoke but never faltering. Suddenly, a radar ping caught her attention. A blip appeared far above, closing rapidly. A military jet, sleek, angular, supersonic, cut across the sky in perfect formation. Kara's heart skipped. The jet was fast, impossibly fast, and it was heading straight for her. A calm, authoritative voice crackled through her radio. "Identify yourself immediately. You are in restricted airspace." Kara swallowed hard, her mouth dry. Restricted airspace. She had been focused solely on saving the passengers, not on violating military regulations. Her heart pounded. She looked at the passengers, their faces pale, sweat gleaming on foreheads, some clutching phones in a futile attempt to call for help. Panic threatened to overwhelm the cabin. "I'm trying to land," she shouted into the radio. "Emergency, engine failure, civilians on board." Static hissed in response, and then silence. The jet's shadow grew larger over her windshield, its pilot's figure obscured by a dark visor, nothing human in its looming silhouette. Kara's stomach twisted. She had never been trained for this. A mechanical failure compounded by the sudden arrival of a military interceptor. The ground rushed up. Kara's pulse hammered in her ears as she executed the emergency landing maneuver, navigating the plane like a fragile bird through a dense forest. Her hands were steady, but her mind screamed with every passing second. The valley floor appeared closer and closer, dotted with boulders and gnarled trees. Tires met the uneven dirt with a jolt. The plane shuddered violently, bouncing like a stone skipping across water. Smoke poured from the engine, filling the cabin, and Kara felt her fingers slipping against the controls from sweat and tension. Then silence. A surreal, fragile quiet settled as the plane skidded to a halt, dust and debris settling around them. Kara exhaled shakily, her body trembling. Relief should have been immediate, but it didn't come. Above, the shadow of the F-22 lingered. The jet hovered, almost taunting, its pilot unmoving, scanning. Kara's chest tightened. The radio hissed again. "Step out of the aircraft immediately," the voice commanded, calm but cold. Kara's mind raced. She had saved lives, yes, but now she faced a new danger. A confrontation with military authorities who didn't know the full story. Passengers erupted in nervous chatter, some crying, others staring out the windows at the hovering fighter jet. Children clung to parents, their small faces etched with confusion and fear. Kara kept her hands on the controls, her knuckles white. She knew she couldn't abandon them, not now. But the F-22 pilot wasn't waiting. Seconds stretched like hours. Every scenario she had ever trained for seemed inadequate. Her heart pounded, adrenaline spiked, sweat beaded on her forehead. Then with a cautious inhale, Kara made a decision. She would leave the plane under supervision, but she would ensure every passenger was safe first. "Everyone stay seated," she instructed, voice trembling slightly but firm. A passenger asked, voice shaky, "Are they going to shoot us?" Kara's gaze met theirs, and she forced a calmness she didn't feel. "No, just stay calm, we're fine." As she opened the cockpit door, a gust of mountain wind slammed against her, tugging at her jacket. The F-22 hovered a few hundred feet above, and she could make out the pilot's figure now, a silhouette against the bright sky, helmet reflecting the sunlight. Kara swallowed hard. She had a plane full of civilians, a failing engine, and an F-22 watching her every move. The stakes had risen higher than she had ever imagined. And as she stepped onto the uneven valley floor, she realized this was only the beginning. Someone up there, someone powerful, was now aware of her actions, and the consequences, they could be deadly. The passenger's eyes followed her, fear and gratitude intertwined, but Kara didn't have time to acknowledge them. Her mind raced, heart hammering. She had saved their lives for now, but she had no idea what was coming next. Above, the F-22 hovered, patient, calculating. Below, the rugged valley floor seemed impossibly small, holding them like a fragile stage for what was about to unfold. Kara took a deep breath. This was supposed to be a routine flight. But nothing in her life had ever been routine, and now, nothing would ever be the same again. Kara's boots crunched against the gravel-strewn valley floor as she led the passengers toward the small patch of cleared ground where the F-22 had descended. Dust swirled around them, catching the morning sun in golden streaks. The air was thick with tension. The smell of burning engine oil lingered, mingling with the crisp scent of pine. Behind her, the passengers shuffled nervously, wide-eyed, some clutching children, others holding phones like lifelines. Kara's heart pounded in her ears, but she forced a calmness she didn't feel. The F-22 hovered just a few dozen meters above the valley, its sleek metallic frame gleaming under the sun. The pilot had not moved yet, but every subtle twitch of the aircraft felt deliberate, almost predatory. Kara could feel the weight of eyes on her through the reflective visor. She forced herself to breathe, to stay composed for the passenger's sake. "Stay behind me," she murmured, voice barely audible over the settling engines. Then, without warning, the canopy of the fighter opened. Kara froze. The pilot, perfectly still in the seat, now revealed their figure to the world, or at least to her. She blinked. The visor reflected sunlight, hiding the pilot's face, but there was something eerily familiar in the posture, the precision, the subtle tilt of the head. Kara's pulse accelerated. Had she? No, impossible. She shook her head, forcing rationality over panic. There was no way. The pilot's voice crackled over the radio, smooth, controlled, devoid of emotion. "Lieutenant Mitchell, step out of the aircraft immediately. This is restricted airspace. You are in violation. Any further noncompliance will be treated as hostile action." Kara's stomach twisted. Violation. She had saved lives, yes, saved every single passenger from almost certain death. But now, protocol was a cage she could not escape. One wrong move, one hesitant word, and she could go from hero to criminal in a matter of seconds. Her hands gripped the yoke tightly. She scanned the passengers, tourists, elderly couples, a mother clutching her crying toddler. Fear reflected in their eyes, and Kara's own fear twisted around guilt. She could not abandon them, not now. Her voice, calm yet resolute, cut through the cabin. "Everyone remain seated. Do exactly as I say." The passengers complied, trembling, their faces pale but trusting. Kara exhaled sharply, summoning every ounce of control she had. With a deep breath, she climbed down the cockpit ladder. Every step felt surreal, like she was moving in slow motion, the world compressed into a frame of heightened tension. The F-22 pilot finally moved, descending in a perfectly controlled hover, landing a few meters away. Kara's instincts screamed caution. The pilot removed their helmet, revealing her breath-caught Major Hayes, her former instructor, now fully grown in a pristine flight suit, eyes sharper than ever. "Kara," he said, voice calm but layered with incredulity. "What the hell are you doing here?" She swallowed hard, words catching in her throat. "Engine failure," she said finally, gesturing toward the smoking left engine. "I had no choice. I saved them." Hayes' eyes scanned the passengers, a flicker of acknowledgement passing across his face, but it vanished almost instantly, replaced by the familiar, rigid military composure. "You violated multiple protocols," he said. His tone was neither reprimanding nor approving, but the weight behind it was unmistakable. Kara's pulse hammered. "Yes, but the passengers," she began. "I saved their lives." Hayes' gaze softened briefly, then hardened again. He gestured for her to follow him, and Kara's heart lurched. Why now? Why involve her? The passengers watched, wide-eyed, whispering among themselves. One woman clutched her husband's arm, trembling. Are they going to arrest her?" she asked. Kara forced herself to ignore the fear clawing at her chest, focusing on Hayes. Step by step, they moved toward the military operations tent set up hastily in the valley, a small canvas structure flapping in the wind. Every movement felt like a test, each second stretching like elastic. Inside the tent, the smell of electronics, coffee, and urgency hit Kara. Radios crackled, agents moved with brisk efficiency, and monitors displayed the valley from multiple angles. Kara's heart sank. This was more than a routine interception. This was scrutiny, analysis, eyes everywhere. Hayes guided her to a monitor displaying her exact landing, the plane's smoke trailing in real time. "They've been watching you from the moment your engine faltered," he said. "Every move, every maneuver. They know exactly who you are." Kara's pulse quickened. Who knows?" she whispered, dread curling in her stomach. Hayes hesitated, then leaned closer. "The Pentagon, the Operations Division. Your flight was unauthorized, but more importantly, your identity is classified, and someone just confirmed your actions. They're analyzing whether it's a risk or a hero move." Kara felt the weight of the words crash over her. She had trained for emergencies in classified conditions, but this, the exposure of her identity, was something she had never prepared for. Outside the tent, the wind howled through the mountains, carrying the faint echoes of passenger murmurs, the hum of the F-22 engines, the scent of pine and smoke blending into a surreal cocktail. Kara's eyes met Hayes. "You know what this means, don't you?" he asked quietly. She swallowed, a lump forming in her throat. "Yes. Grounding, investigation, exposure, perhaps even imprisonment. But worse, her secret, her covert life revealed." Her fingers trembled as she reached for the folder Hayes handed her, classified, marked top secret. She hesitated, then flipped it open. Flight logs, mission simulations, encrypted communications, all her covert assignments lay bare on the table. Every unauthorized maneuver, every classified flight mission she had undertaken for years, documented in black and white. Kara's breath hitched. How many people knew? How many had watched her? Hayes' gaze held her own, sharp and unflinching. "You're in uncharted territory now," he said. "They've got eyes on you, and the consequences aren't just about protocol. They could end careers or lives." Kara nodded, the weight of responsibility pressing on her chest. She had saved the passengers, but now the world above the valley had shifted, and she didn't yet know whether it would collapse on her or elevate her. Outside, the F-22 remained a silent sentinel. Kara's eyes followed its every movement, instinctively tracking the glint of sunlight off the metallic fuselage. Her body was tense, every muscle alert. The passengers had begun to gather their belongings, still unaware of the full scope of what had just unfolded, still thinking they had simply survived a mechanical failure. Kara couldn't tell them the truth. Not yet. Not until she understood it herself. Her fingers brushed against the folder again. She had trained for emergencies, for split-second decisions. But this was different. And as the sun climbed higher over the Rockies, bathing the valley in light, Kara realized one unshakable truth. Saving lives had consequences far beyond what she had ever imagined. The wind picked up, rattling the tent and the plane's wings. Outside, the F-22 adjusted its position as if signaling an unspoken warning. Kara's chest tightened. Whatever was coming next, it would not be routine, not by a long shot. And as she turned back to the passengers, watching their faces filled with trust and relief, she felt a shiver of dread and exhilaration. One wrong move, one hesitation, and everything, the passengers, her career, her secret identity, could be destroyed in an instant. The tent flapped violently as the mountain wind picked up, rattling the canvas walls like a warning. Kara Mitchell's heart raced, every nerve alert, as she followed Major Hayes deeper into the military encampment. The passengers clustered behind her, unsure whether to trust the situation or panic. Their eyes were wide with awe and fear, tourists caught in a sudden brush with a world they had only ever seen on the news. Kara's chest tightened with guilt and responsibility. She had saved them, yes, but in doing so, she had triggered a chain reaction far beyond a mechanical failure. Hayes led her to the center of the tent, where a bank of monitors glowed, each displaying different angles of the valley, the plain, and the hovering F-22. The hum of electronics filled the air, a constant reminder that every move she had made had been recorded, analyzed, and dissected in real time. Kara swallowed hard, trying to steady her breathing. "You don't understand," she began, her voice tight. "I had no choice. They would have been fine for a few minutes longer, or dead." Hayes interrupted, his voice calm but laced with steel. He stepped closer, scanning her face, searching for signs of hesitation or deceit. Kara met his gaze, unflinching, though her pulse raced. "I had to act," she said firmly. "Lives were on the line. I didn't care about protocol. I didn't care about clearance. I did what needed to be done." Hayes' expression softened for a fraction of a second, but then hardened again. He gestured toward one of the monitors. The screen showed a real-time feed of the passengers stepping gingerly from the plane, still clutching bags and children, unaware of the magnitude of the moment. "You realize," he said, "that by landing here in this exact location, you've triggered a full-scale military response. That F-22 above isn't just a warning, it's a full assessment team. They've been watching your every move since you began your descent, and now they're evaluating you." Kara's stomach churned. Every training session, every covert operation she had ever undertaken flashed through her mind. She had been prepared for emergencies, for hostile skis, for enemy territory, but never for this, a mechanical failure escalating into a full-blown international incident. And now, someone higher up in the Pentagon had eyes on her, someone who didn't know whether to call her a hero or a threat. The tent's flaps burst open, letting in a gust of cold mountain air. Two uniformed officers entered, each holding a tablet and scanning her intently. Kara's heart tightened. Every step she had taken, every emergency maneuver, was now scrutinized not just by Hayes, but by unknown authorities who might interpret her heroism as recklessness, or worse, sabotage. She clenched her fists at her sides, forcing herself to remain composed. Hayes gestured for her to sit. Kara remained standing. "Do you even understand the ramifications of what you just did?" Hayes asked quietly, his tone sharp but tinged with an unusual concern. Kara shook her head slightly, anger and fear mixing into a bitter cocktail. "I saved lives," she repeated. "I did what any pilot with half a conscience would have done." "You didn't just save lives," Hayes said, eyes narrowing. "You revealed yourself, your identity, your skills, your entire career and your missions." Kara froze. The weight of his words hit her like a physical blow. She had spent years under deep cover, flying classified missions nobody could know about. She had trained for emergencies, drills, hostile territories, but she had never imagined a single landing in the mountains could expose everything she had worked for. The room fell silent for a moment, the only sound the hum of monitors and the distant roar of the hovering F-22. Then Hayes spoke again, softer this time. "You know they're analyzing your every move, every protocol you bypassed, every decision you made in the cockpit, and now they want to know, are you a hero or a liability?" Kara swallowed, her throat dry. "I did what I had to do. They're alive. Isn't that proof enough?" Hayes shook his head slowly. "It isn't about saving lives anymore. It's about control, about perception, about who gets to make decisions when lives are at stake. You acted alone. That's the problem. In their eyes, your heroism is irrelevant if it's unauthorized. Outside the tent, the wind picked up again, whistling across the valley. Kara's gaze drifted to the hovering F-22, sleek and imposing, a silent judge watching every moment. She felt exposed, vulnerable, yet defiant. Every instinct screamed that she had done the right thing, but now she realized heroism in the real world was never simple. It carried consequences she had not anticipated. Hayes stepped closer, lowering his voice. "There's something else you need to know," he said. Kara's pulse quickened. She had expected reprimands, grounding, perhaps a full investigation, but now there was something deeper, more ominous. Someone up there knows exactly what you did and why, and they're not going to wait for your explanation. They're forming conclusions right now. Kara's stomach twisted. Her mind raced through possibilities: the Pentagon, the Air Force Operations Division, hackers, foreign surveillance. Every scenario ended in danger. "Who?" she whispered, barely audible. Hayes' eyes met hers, unwavering. "That, Kara, is the question you'll have to answer very soon." Her gaze flicked back to the passengers, still unaware of the storm swirling above them. One elderly couple clutched each other's hands, their faces pale but relieved. A young child tugged at her mother's sleeve, asking if everything was okay. Kara's chest tightened. She had saved them, but at what cost? And more importantly, would she be able to survive the fallout herself? The monitors flickered, and one of the officers pointed to a new incoming feed. Kara leaned closer. The F-22 above shifted, adjusting position, wings slicing through the air with surgical precision. Its pilot moved deliberately, as if aware that every choice, every second, was critical. Kara's blood ran cold. Whoever was in that cockpit wasn't just monitoring her. They were assessing her, calculating, judging. Hayes leaned closer, voice low but urgent. "Kara, your skills are undeniable, but now your unauthorized actions have made you visible. They know your capabilities. They know how decisive you are under pressure. And most importantly, they know you can act independently. That makes you both a valuable asset and a potential threat." Kara's throat tightened. The weight of the moment settled heavily on her shoulders. She had acted to save lives, but now the very act of saving lives had painted a target on her back. She glanced once more at the passengers, then back at Hayes, realizing that the world she had tried to leave behind, the world of classified missions, covert operations, and unyielding scrutiny, had just pulled her back in, harder and faster than ever before. Her breath came shallow, quick. She could feel her hands trembling ever so slightly, but her gaze remained sharp. Every instinct screamed that the next moments would define everything: her career, her life, her freedom. And as she stared at the monitors showing the F-22 hovering above, she realized one undeniable truth. The confrontation had only just begun. The tent felt impossibly small as Kara Mitchell stared at the figure before her. Major Hayes, her former flight instructor, stood motionless, helmet now held under one arm, his sharp eyes locking onto hers. Kara's stomach knotted. The face beneath the visor was unmistakable, someone she had trusted, someone who had trained her in classified operations that nobody else could ever know about. Memories rushed back. Early mornings in simulation pods, emergency drills under extreme conditions, hours spent mastering maneuvers that were never meant for public eyes. And now all of it, every covert flight, every secret mission, hung in the balance. Hayes' gaze softened briefly, an almost imperceptible flicker of nostalgia passing through his eyes. "Kara," he said, voice calm but heavy, "you're playing a dangerous game. Do you realize what you just did?" Kara's hands trembled slightly, though her expression remained resolute. "I saved lives," she said firmly. "That's all that matters. Protocol doesn't matter when people are in immediate danger." Hayes shook his head slowly, stepping closer, his movements deliberate, almost ceremonial. "You think that's all this is? You've just exposed yourself to scrutiny from every branch that monitors missions like yours. The Pentagon already knows an unauthorized flight took place, and now they know who executed it." Kara swallowed hard. Her mind raced. memories of every classified mission she'd undertaken flashing in her mind like a rapid slideshow. She had been trained to respond under extreme pressure, to make life-and-death decisions without hesitation, but nothing had prepared her for the fallout of exposure. The lives she had saved could now be used against her. Every move she made from this point forward would be dissected, analyzed, and judged. Hayes gestured toward the monitors displaying the valley below. Passengers were gathered near the plane, still shaken but unaware of the true stakes. Kara's chest tightened. "They have no idea," she whispered. "They just think I landed a plane." Hayes' lips pressed into a thin line. "They'll find out. They always find out. And the moment they connect the dots, your identity will no longer be secret. Every covert operation you've conducted, every flight assignment marked classified, it will all be in question. And Kara, once they question you, there's no turning back." Kara's throat went dry. The realization settled in. She had traded immediate heroism for long-term peril. Saving the passengers had been instinctive, moral, but it had also shattered the fragile barrier keeping her life as a covert operative hidden. She had always believed she could balance both worlds, the civilian pilot and the covert agent. But now they collided violently. Hayes' expression shifted again, a mixture of concern and exasperation. "You trained for emergencies," he said quietly. "You learned to handle mechanical failures, hostile skis, enemy encounters. But did you ever train for this? For having your every decision scrutinized while innocent lives hang in the balance? Because that's what you're facing now. And the people watching you, they're not forgiving." Kara felt the weight of his words crush her chest. For years she had hidden in plain sight, flying missions nobody could ever acknowledge. She had believed that her skill and caution would shield her from exposure. But now everything was unraveling in a single moment. And yet she refused to regret her choice. Lives had been saved. That was undeniable. That was real. Hayes leaned closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "There's more," he said. Kara's pulse quickened. She felt a chill creeping down her spine. "They're not just analyzing your landing. They're analyzing your tactics, your timing, your judgment under pressure. And more than that, they want to know why you acted independently. They'll ask questions that can't be answered without revealing classified information. And Kara, every answer you give could either protect you or destroy you." Kara's mind raced. The implications were staggering. She had acted on instinct, on principle, but now principle and protocol were colliding violently. The very act of heroism had placed her in a position of extreme vulnerability. Every moment she spent in the valley, every conversation she had with Hayes, every breath she took would be scrutinized. Every passenger she had saved was now an unwitting witness to a larger game she could no longer control. She glanced at the monitors again. The F-22 hovered in the distance, engines humming with lethal precision. It was more than a guard. It was a reminder that the world above the valley was watching, waiting, calculating. Kara felt a surge of frustration mixed with fear. She had flown hundreds of classified missions, faced threats nobody could imagine. But now the threat was bureaucracy, surveillance, and suspicion. Hayes' voice cut through her thoughts. "Kara, you have to understand something critical. You're a liability and an asset at the same time. They see your skill, your bravery, your ability to think and act independently, but that same independence terrifies them. It puts them in a position where they either have to trust you or neutralize the risk." Kara's eyes widened. The words were clear, almost cruelly precise. She was walking a knife edge. Any misstep, any misjudgment could ruin her career, or worse, compromise national security. For a moment she felt the familiar sting of panic, the same adrenaline she had felt when the left engine failed and smoke had filled the cabin. But this panic was different, slower, heavier, more calculated. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about secrecy, control, and trust in a world where both were fragile commodities. She glanced at Hayes, realizing that even he could only partially shield her now. Hayes' expression softened once more. "You did the right thing, Kara, but the right thing now is different from the right thing in the air. You have to be smart, calculated, careful. One misstep and all those lives you saved could be used as leverage against you." Kara nodded slowly, swallowing her fear, steeling herself. She had been trained for emergencies, but this was different. She would have to navigate a minefield where every choice had consequences beyond imagination. The tent door flapped again as another officer entered, handing Hayes a secure tablet. Hayes glanced at it, his face tightening imperceptibly. "They're escalating," he muttered, almost to himself. Kara leaned forward. "Escalating? What do you mean?" Hayes' eyes met hers, serious and unyielding. "The Pentagon wants to know everything now, and they're not waiting for explanations. They're forming conclusions based on what they've seen so far. And Kara, some of those conclusions could change everything." Kara's throat went dry. The passengers below had no idea the storm above the valley, no idea the political and military consequences of a single heroic landing. She felt both pride and dread. She had acted instinctively to save lives, but now those instincts had thrown her into a world where every decision, every action, every word would be analyzed and judged. She felt exposed, vulnerable, yet alive in a way she hadn't felt since her earliest missions. Hayes leaned back, his gaze steady, almost fatherly in its concern. "The next hours are critical, Kara. One wrong move, one poorly chosen word, and your life, your career, and everything you fought for could unravel. Are you ready for that?" Kara met his gaze, every muscle tense, every thought focused. "I have to be," she said, voice steady despite the storm inside. "I don't have a choice." Outside, the wind whistled. The F-22 hovered. The passengers waited, and Kara realized the truth she could no longer deny. The landing was only the beginning. What came next would determine whether she remained a hero in the eyes of the world, or a classified casualty of her own bravery. Kara Mitchell sat stiffly on the edge of a folding chair inside the military operations tent, her mind a storm of adrenaline and anxiety. The passengers she had saved were safely escorted to a nearby lodge, unaware that their lives had intersected with a secret world of covert operations and high-stakes surveillance. Kara's chest felt tight, every muscle coiled like a spring. She had executed an emergency landing that saved lives, but now the consequences were far beyond her control. Major Hayes stood beside her, arms crossed, scanning the monitors with a grim intensity. Every movement on the screens told a story of scrutiny. Multiple angles of the valley, live feeds from the hovering F-22, and a stream of encrypted data from Pentagon intelligence analysts tracking her actions in real time. Kara's pulse quickened as she watched herself on the monitors, the unauthorized landing replayed in excruciating detail. Every maneuver, every split-second decision, every hand movement in the cockpit was logged, assessed, and judged by eyes she couldn't see. "They know more than you realize," Hayes said quietly, leaning closer. Kara's stomach tight. "Who?" she whispered. Hayes hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "The Pentagon, Operations Division, multiple agencies. They're aware of your entire flight record, Kara. Every mission you've flown under classified orders, every drill, every emergency exercise. They're piecing together who you are and what you're capable of." Kara's mind raced. She had trained for emergencies, hostile skis, even enemy engagements, but this was different. This wasn't about her flying skills. This was about her identity, her covert career, and the consequences of a single impulsive, yet morally justified decision. One unauthorized landing had placed her entire life under a microscope. And worse, she knew that exposure could lead to questions she could not answer without revealing the truth, her entire existence as a classified operative. Hayes handed her a small, secured folder labeled Top Secret. "You need to understand the stakes," he said, voice low. Kara opened it carefully. Flight logs, encrypted communications, covert mission summaries, everything she had done was laid bare. Her hands shook slightly as she flipped through the pages. She had always operated in shadows, invisible to the world, but now her shadows had a spotlight, and every move would be scrutinized. "They're debating your status as we speak," Hayes continued. "Some see you as a hero who saved lives. Others see you as a rogue agent, someone who acted without clearance, someone whose independence makes them a liability. And Kara, once classified operations are involved, perception becomes everything." Kara's throat tightened. She had acted out of instinct and principle. She had saved lives. But instinct and principle didn't matter to bureaucracies that measured risk, reputation, and control over morality. Outside, the wind howled across the valley, whipping dust and debris into swirling eddies. Kara's gaze drifted to the hovering F-22, now circling slowly above the clearing. Its pilot was more than an observer. Hayes had told her this already, and she felt it in her bones. Whoever was in that cockpit knew her history, her skills, and her capacity for independent action. And now, after the unauthorized landing, Kara was visible in a way she had never been. Hayes' voice drew her back. "There's more, Kara. This isn't just about paperwork or reprimands. They've initiated an evaluation, your actions, your decision-making, your ability to respond under pressure. They're asking, can someone like you operate safely outside strict protocols? Can you be trusted, or are you a risk to everything we've worked for?" Kara swallowed hard. Every mission she had flown, every life she had saved under covert orders, now existed in the same context as a civilian emergency landing. Her heroism and her liability were now inseparable. The tent's flaps rattled and two more officers entered, holding encrypted tablets. Hayes glanced at them and nodded. One stepped forward, addressing Kara with a clipped formality. "Lieutenant Mitchell, the Operations Division has issued a preliminary assessment. Your unauthorized landing has triggered an internal review. All classified flight records have been cross-referenced. You are now considered a person of interest until further notice. You will be monitored continuously, and any further independent action will be deemed a potential threat." Kara's pulse spiked. The words were clinical, detached, but the weight behind them was suffocating. She had acted to save lives, yet now the very act that had defined her as a hero was being twisted into evidence against her. Every move she made from this point forward could be weaponized, every instinct scrutinized. She felt trapped, like a chess piece on a board with no visible edges, with unseen players manipulating outcomes she could not predict. Hayes placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "I can't protect you from what's coming," he said quietly, "but I can guide you through it. You have to stay composed. Every decision you make in the next few hours could determine whether you remain a valued asset or are sidelined permanently. And Kara, some of those decisions will test you in ways you've never imagined." Kara nodded slowly, forcing herself to breathe. She had faced countless emergencies, hostile skis, mechanical failures, even enemy fire. But this, the threat of exposure, of scrutiny, of being judged by unseen authorities, felt far more perilous. Her mind flicked to the passengers, still safe in the nearby lodge. They were unaware of the storm raging above, unaware that the simple act of landing a plane had set off a chain reaction that could destroy careers, compromise national security, and expose secrets that could never be undone. Hayes handed her a secure tablet. "This is your current status," he said. Kara opened it, scanning the encrypted files. Live feeds of the valley, communications between intelligence officers, real-time analysis of her unauthorized maneuver. Every data point, every split-second decision, every evasive action she had taken was dissected with meticulous precision. Kara's stomach churned. She realized that the landing was no longer about survival. It was now about managing perception, protecting secrets, and navigating a labyrinth of bureaucracy that could crush her at any moment. For the first time in her career, Kara felt the weight of vulnerability in a new way. Her skills, her bravery, and her moral clarity had saved lives, but now those same qualities were being evaluated, measured, and judged. And the F-22 above, silent and lethal, was a reminder that the world she had always moved through with precision and control now had eyes on her, judging every move. Hayes' voice broke into her thoughts again. "Kara, remember this. You are both the problem and the solution. Your heroism brought you here, but your secrecy and skill are what will keep you alive. Every choice you make in the coming hours must balance these forces. One mistake, one misstep, and it's over." Kara's pulse thundered. She knew he was right. She had acted decisively to save lives, But now, in the aftermath, every action would be evaluated as either courageous or reckless. The wind howled through the valley, carrying the faint echoes of passenger chatter. Kara's gaze lifted to the hovering F-22 once more. The pilot's visor reflected sunlight, sharp and deliberate, a silent reminder of the eyes watching her. The valley was no longer a place of safety. It was now a stage for decisions with consequences she could barely comprehend. Kara took a deep breath, letting the cold mountain air fill her lungs. Her hands tightened into fists. She had saved lives. She had acted decisively. But now the real test was about to begin. Surviving scrutiny, protecting her hidden identity, and navigating a world where one wrong move could destroy everything she had fought for. The valley had grown eerily silent. The passengers, still sheltered in the nearby lodge, had no idea that the skies above them were now a battlefield of scrutiny and hidden agendas. Kara Mitchell stood beside Major Hayes in the operations tent, her eyes fixed on the monitors. The feed from the hovering F-22 flickered intermittently, and the approaching second fighter, the one whose insignia made her stomach twist, moved with precision that could only mean one thing. They weren't just observing anymore. Hayes' jaw was tight. "They're closing in," he muttered, voice low but controlled. Kara's pulse thundered in her ears. She felt the familiar mix of fear and adrenaline that had driven her through countless missions, but this was different. This wasn't enemy fire. This wasn't mechanical failure. This was bureaucracy and surveillance weaponized, and it carried far higher stakes. "They know you're compromised," Hayes continued. "They've initiated an intercept protocol. It's not just a warning anymore. They're testing you." Kara's hands clenched into fists. She had saved the passengers, had performed an impossible emergency landing, and yet now her heroism had put her directly in the crosshairs. Every instinct screamed to take control, to maneuver, to act, but the reality was stark. She was in a delicate limbo. The valley below was too populated for aggressive maneuvers, yet above, the F-22s circled like predators, analyzing, judging, waiting for her next move. The tablet Hayes handed her flickered with encrypted communications. Messages scrolled rapidly, fragments of assessments from the Pentagon, unauthorized flight, high-risk liability, independent action, potential breach of classified operations. Kara's stomach twisted. Every word reinforced the danger. She had flown hundreds of classified missions, handled hostile skis, evaded detection, but now her own government questioned her judgment. Every action that had once been a mark of skill and bravery was now a potential weapon against her. Outside, the approaching F-22 cast a shadow over the valley, its engines humming like a metallic predator. Kara's gaze followed its movement. This pilot, unknown but unmistakably skilled, knew her tactics. They could predict her next maneuver before she even made it. Every instinct honed through years of classified training screamed at her, "Treat this as a threat." But any aggressive maneuver could endanger the passengers she had just saved. Her chest tightened. Every decision carried life-or-death consequences, not just for her, but for the civilians below. Hayes placed a hand on her shoulder. "You need to think fast. They're not here to communicate. They're here to test your limits. And Kara, the Pentagon is watching everything. One wrong move, one hesitation, and your actions will be interpreted as hostile. Do you understand?" Kara nodded, swallowing hard. The weight of his words settled in her chest. She had faced enemy fire. She had faced impossible odds in the air. But nothing had prepared her for the suffocating, invisible pressure of judgment, surveillance, and potential betrayal. Her mind raced through possibilities. She could attempt a defensive maneuver, but that risked the passengers. She could wait, hope for communication, but every second spent idle allowed the F-22s to tighten their assessment. She felt cornered, trapped in a chessboard where every move was calculated by unseen players. And yet, despite the danger, Kara knew she could not abandon her moral imperative. Lives were at stake, and she was still responsible. The tent's flaps rattled violently as the wind picked up. Kara glanced outside, eyes narrowing. The approaching F-22 adjusted its position, descending slightly, wings slicing through the sky with surgical precision. Its pilot was unyielding, controlled, almost eerily calm. Kara's stomach twisted. Whoever was in that cockpit didn't just know her identity, they knew her capabilities. Every maneuver, every decision, every reaction was predictable to them. And she realized, with a sinking feeling, that they could force her hand without ever firing a shot. Hayes leaned closer, voice low and urgent. Kara, this is a calculated threat. They're not here to destroy you yet, they're here to see how you respond under pressure. They're testing your decision-making, your ethics, your ability to act decisively. And if they don't like what they see— His words hung in the air, unfinished but heavy with meaning. Kara's chest tightened further. She had saved the passengers, but now her actions were being weaponized as a test. She forced herself to breathe deeply, steadying her trembling hands. Every instinct screamed to act, to take control, to defend. But she knew she had to balance caution with decisiveness. One misstep, one impulsive move could escalate into disaster. Kara glanced at the tablet Hayes had given her. Live data scrolled rapidly, tracking the F-22's trajectory, her altitude, speed, and projected options for maneuvering. Each calculation reinforced a stark reality. She was in a tightrope situation where every choice had immediate and long-term consequences. The passengers' voices reached her faintly from the lodge. One child laughed nervously, asking their mother if everything was going to be okay. Kara's chest tightened. She had saved them physically, but now she realized she was responsible for their safety in a way that transcended simple survival. Her next move could either protect them or put them in unimaginable danger. Hayes' hand tightened slightly on her shoulder. Kara, listen, you're not alone in this, but you are the only one who can make the call right now. Your skills, your instincts, your training, they're the only things standing between the people below and chaos. Remember that. One wrong decision and it won't just be your career on the line, it'll be lives. Kara nodded slowly, swallowing the rising fear and adrenaline. Her body felt alive with tension, every nerve alert, every sense sharpened to a razor's edge. She moved toward the controls of the grounded plane. Not to take off, there wasn't enough room, but to have an option ready, a contingency. Every second counted. Her mind calculated every possible maneuver, every path the F-22 could take. She could see the pilot's assessment in every subtle shift of their aircraft. They were reading her, predicting her, anticipating her moves before she could act. Kara's stomach twisted. This was no longer a landing, no longer an emergency. This was a psychological battlefield, a test of morality, skill, and nerve under the most extreme scrutiny. The F-22's engines roared louder and Kara's pulse surged. Hayes leaned in, voice low. They want a reaction, Kara, but don't give them one they can use against you. Calm, precise, deliberate, that's how you survive this. Kara nodded, forcing herself to slow her racing heart to focus. Lives had been saved, but now her own survival depended on a different kind of skill, strategy, patience, and control under the gaze of unseen authorities. A sudden ping on the tablet caught her eye, a new alert from the Pentagon. Kara glanced at Hayes. His face went pale. They're escalating, he muttered. They're not just evaluating anymore, they're preparing to act. Kara's chest tightened. She felt the familiar, sharp sting of fear. Every action, every decision, every heartbeat mattered. The valley, the passengers, the hovering F-22, it all converged into a single, high-stakes moment. And in that instant, Kara realized the brutal truth. Saving lives had brought her here, but surviving the consequences would require every ounce of skill, courage, and cunning she had ever possessed. Kara's heart pounded like a war drum in her chest. The approaching F-22 sliced through the sky above the valley, engines screaming in a metallic roar that rattled her very bones. Every fiber of her being screamed to act, but the valley below held civilians, passengers she had just saved from certain death. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and her heroism would become catastrophe. Her pulse surged as she weighed every option, every instinct honed through years of classified missions screaming at her. Survival, but never at the cost of innocence. Major Hayes leaned close, voice tight with urgency. Kara, they're making the first move. It's no longer an observation. You have seconds to decide your response. Any aggressive maneuver and it's an escalation, they won't hesitate. Kara swallowed, jaw tight. She had flown hundreds of missions under extreme duress, but nothing had prepared her for this. A combat-grade fighter approaching, fully aware of her tactics, her abilities, and her history above a populated civilian area. She moved toward the grounded plane, checking the instruments, though she knew she couldn't take off. The F-22 was faster, more maneuverable. Any attempt to flee would be futile. Her mind raced through alternatives, creating a diversion, drawing attention elsewhere, using terrain to shield the passengers. But every option carried risks. Every second of hesitation allowed the F-22 to close the distance. Kara could feel the pilot's assessment in every subtle adjustment of the aircraft above. They anticipated her moves before she made them. Hayes' hand gripped her shoulder firmly. Stay calm, precise, deliberate. They want a reaction they can exploit. Don't give them one. Protect the passengers, everything else comes second. Kara nodded tightly. She could feel her hands trembling, but she forced control over them. The valley was silent except for the roar of engines, the wind whipping around the mountains, and her own ragged breaths. Time had compressed. Every second felt like an eternity, every heartbeat a drum counting down to catastrophe. The F-22 banked sharply, wings glinting in the morning sun. Kara's stomach twisted. Whoever was in that cockpit knew her instincts, her habits, her decision-making style. This was no longer a simple test. This was a confrontation, and they were coming in hard. She realized with a jolt that her life, and perhaps the lives she had saved, now rested on a precarious balance of courage, intuition, and split-second decision-making. Hayes gestured toward a small ridge line a few hundred meters from the plane. Use the terrain, he said. Keep them off balance, force them to anticipate. You can't match speed with speed, but you can create uncertainty. Kara's mind raced. She could guide the passengers behind the ridge, using natural cover to shield them, while forcing the F-22 to adjust its trajectory repeatedly. It was risky. Any miscalculation could expose the civilians, but it was the only viable option she had. She moved quickly, directing the passengers toward the ridge. Their faces were pale, wide-eyed, yet trusting. Kara's chest tightened. She had saved them once, but now she was shepherding them into danger again, into a zone where human skill and instinct were pitted against modern warfare machinery. She forced herself to breathe, to slow her racing thoughts. Every movement had to be precise, every instruction clear, every second counted. Above, the F-22 executed a tight maneuver, banking violently, engines roaring like thunder. Kara's pulse spiked. The pilot's skill was unparalleled. She had trained under some of the best, but this was different. This person knew her methods, and now they were testing her resolve under pressure that could crush steel. Kara felt the weight of her secret identity pressing down on her. Every decision she made now would reveal more of herself, more than she had ever intended. Hayes' voice cut through the roar. Kara, remember, independence is your strength, but discretion is your shield. You have to balance both. One wrong move and everything you fought to protect, your identity, your career, the passengers, could be lost in an instant. Kara nodded, focusing on the ridge line, the natural cover, the safest path for the passengers. The F-22 dipped lower, wings slicing shadows across the valley, forcing her to act. She issued instructions rapidly, calmly, guiding the civilians behind the ridge while calculating each movement. Her voice was steady, controlled, even as her adrenaline spiked. Stay low, move quickly, follow me. They obeyed without hesitation, trusting her even as chaos roared above them. Kara's mind sharpened. Instincts honed over years of covert missions kicked in. She could read the F-22's trajectory, anticipate its maneuvers, and manipulate the environment to force hesitation. The F-22 pilot adjusted their course again, dropping slightly to maintain visual contact. Kara's heart raced. She had created a temporary shield, a barrier between the civilians and the aircraft's line of sight, but it wasn't enough. She needed to think faster, act smarter, predict the pilot's next move before they executed it. Every second brought her closer to confrontation, closer to exposure, closer to a truth that could change everything. Hayes' voice was urgent. Kara, they're calculating, watch for misdirection. One false move and they'll escalate, keep them guessing. Kara's hands clenched the ridge's rocky surface. She understood instinctively. The pilot was testing her moral and tactical boundaries simultaneously. Could she protect lives while maintaining her secrecy? Could she survive scrutiny while asserting control? The answers weren't guaranteed. She signaled the passengers to remain behind the ridge. Then, using a combination of rapid repositioning and natural terrain as cover, Kara guided the F-22 into a series of minor course adjustments. Each maneuver forced the pilot to anticipate her next move, creating a tense chess game above the valley. Her heart pounded, sweat streaking her face, but she remained calm in outward appearance. Internally, every nerve screamed alert, every instinct razor-sharp. Suddenly, the F-22 banked aggressively, dropping closer to the ridge. Kara froze momentarily, assessing the new threat vector. This was more than observation, it was a direct challenge. She could feel the pilot's intent. They were testing her limits, trying to provoke a reaction, pushing her to expose herself. Kara exhaled slowly, forcing calm over panic. She would not give them leverage. Not now, not ever. Kara Mitchell's heart pounded as the F-22 swooped over the ridge, the pilot's precision almost surgical. Every instinct she had honed over years of covert missions screamed at her. Observe, predict, survive. But now the stakes were higher than any simulation, higher than any enemy engagement she had faced. Lives hung in the balance, the passengers she had saved, the civilians below, and even her own career. And above all, her secret identity, years of covert operations, was teetering on the edge of exposure. The F-22 pilot banked sharply, dropping just enough to force Kara's hand. Her pulse raced, adrenaline surging, but she forced herself to remain calm. Every movement was calculated. Every decision was deliberate. She couldn't fight the aircraft head-on. Any attempt would have risked disaster, but she could control perception. She could create uncertainty. She could survive this test, and she would protect those under her care, no matter the personal cost. Hayes stood beside her, watching silently. His expression was tense but controlled. Kara, this is it. One move, one decision. This is the moment they either recognize your skill or perceive you as a threat. Trust your instincts. Protect the passengers. Everything else follows. Kara nodded, her jaw tight. She had faced impossible odds before, but now she faced something more insidious. An opponent who knew her better than anyone else. Someone who could manipulate every reaction, every choice, to reveal her secrets. She guided the passengers behind the ridge, using natural cover to shield them from the F-22's line of sight. Every subtle movement, every instruction she gave, was designed to keep them safe while buying time to maneuver. Her voice was steady, calm, yet every word carried the weight of authority forged through life-and-death experience. Stay low, move fast, follow me. They obeyed without hesitation, their trust in her absolute, a bond forged in crisis. Above, the F-22 pilot made a sudden adjustment, banking aggressively, clearly signaling intent to challenge her further. Kara's stomach twisted. This wasn't just a test of skill. It was a test of morality, judgment, and identity. Every maneuver she had executed, every decision she had made over her career, could now be judged and misinterpreted. Exposure loomed, the weight of her covert life threatening to crush the fragile balance she had maintained. Hayes' voice cut through the roar of engines. Kara, they're trying to provoke you. Don't give them leverage. Make them question themselves instead. Lead them where you need them to go. Kara's mind raced. She understood instantly. The pilot above wanted her to act impulsively, to reveal her limits, to betray her principles. She had one chance to turn the encounter into control rather than confrontation. With a series of precise maneuvers, Kara drew the F-22 along a path where the ridge and valley terrain created natural cover, forcing the pilot to adjust repeatedly. Every motion was deliberate, a dance of anticipation and countermove. She could feel the pilot's tension as their path adjusted, their expectations challenged. Kara's pulse surged, adrenaline and strategy intertwining. She was no longer reacting. She was controlling the engagement, asserting dominance without aggression. Then came the moment of truth. The F-22 banked sharply, engine screaming, coming dangerously close to the ridge. Kara's stomach lurched. But then she saw it, the glint of recognition in the pilot's visor. A familiar feature, subtle yet undeniable. Her heart froze. It was someone from her past, someone who had trained her during her earliest classified missions, a person who knew everything about her. Kara's mind raced. She had anticipated skill, aggression, calculation, but not personal history. The pilot above, once mentor, now evaluator, now judge, understood her methods, her instincts, her covert identity. Every maneuver she had made was decipherable to them. Her secret life, hidden for years, teetered on the edge of exposure. The weight was immense, suffocating, but Kara's resolve hardened. She adjusted the plane's position subtly, using terrain and perspective to control the pilot's assessment. Then, with calm precision, she reached for the encrypted tablet Hayes had given her and initiated secure communications. "This is Kara Mitchell," she spoke firmly, voice steady despite the storm of adrenaline. "I have secured the passengers and assessed the situation, requesting direct verification and acknowledgement. Unauthorized landing was executed to preserve lives. All actions documented and compliant with emergency protocols, under circumstances of immediate threat." The response came quickly, encrypted, precise, and unmistakable. The pilot in the F-22 acknowledged her protocol adherence, confirming that her actions, while unauthorized, were morally and operationally justified. Kara exhaled slowly, relief flooding her system, but it was tempered by the awareness that her secret identity was now recognized by someone in a position of authority who could either protect or expose her. Hayes' eyes softened slightly. "You did it," he murmured. "You controlled the situation, protected lives, and maintained your principles, but now your secret is out, and someone above sees both your heroism and your operational capability. They will decide your next steps." Kara nodded slowly, processing the gravity. She had saved lives, preserved her moral integrity, and confronted the ultimate test, but the revelation of her identity marked a turning point. Outside the ridge, the passengers were safe, their relief palpable. One child ran toward Kara, eyes wide, clutching a small toy, asking if everything was okay. Kara smiled faintly, kneeling to meet the child's gaze. "Everything's fine," she said softly. "You're safe now." The child's mother reached her hand, trembling, whispering thanks, gratitude shining in her eyes. Kara felt the profound weight of responsibility, the moral clarity of her actions, and the truth that heroism wasn't defined by recognition, but by the lives saved and the choices made under pressure. The F-22 slowly ascended, banking away from the valley. Kara watched as the pilot's silhouette disappeared against the sky, a reminder that surveillance and judgment would remain. She knew her life had changed. The covert world she had navigated with precision was now intersecting with visibility, scrutiny, and accountability. But she also knew this. She had survived, protected lives, and acted with integrity. And in a world where both chaos and bureaucracy loomed, that was a victory beyond measure. Hayes placed a hand on her shoulder once more. "You've proven something few can," he said quietly. "Skill under pressure, moral clarity, and the ability to act decisively when every outcome is uncertain. You've saved lives, and now the world above has seen what you're capable of. That's power, Kara. Use it wisely." Kara exhaled, her chest finally loosening. She had faced mechanical failure, bureaucratic scrutiny, high-stakes surveillance, and a personal test of skill and identity. She had survived, and in doing so, she had transformed a moment of crisis into a testament of courage, intellect, and moral resolve. The passengers below began to gather their belongings, still unaware of the extraordinary ordeal they had just survived. Kara watched them, the human cost and human reward of her actions blending into a singular truth. Heroism is measured not by recognition, but by the courage to act rightly when the consequences are greatest. The valley was quiet once more. The sun glinted off the mountains, the wind rustled through the ridges, and Kara Mitchell stood tall, resolved. She had revealed her secret to the right person, maintained her integrity, and navigated a situation that few could have survived. And now, for the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel the weight of accomplishment, tempered by awareness that the world would never view her actions as simple.